I have been covering a lot of different things on YouTube for a while. And one of the things I can honestly say I would never thought I would cover would be the Justice Society of America. And not in a way where it's kind of like, oh, you know what? I hate that team, or you know what? I feel like the whole entire idea of that team is completely stupid. No, just for some reason, I truthfully never thought I would sit down and actually cover it. And then I had somebody just in my comment section just asking me over and over again, like, can you cover JSA? Now, technically, he did ask me to cover Jeff John's run on the actual, team. But I said, let's go ahead and wind it back a tad bit because I feel like for some people, they kind of get lost of what is the actual starting point for the Justice Society of America. Because for some people out there, they could technically say, like, the starting point for the Justice Society of America would be back in 1940s when you had DC Comics begin the process of building up the first superhero team ever in comics. And really, the 1940s, they were big. Now, as we all know, when it came to comics in the 1940s, by the end of the 40s, they began to fall off a tad bit until the 50s came around. But unfortunately, when it came to the 50s, you then had DC introduce a new concept. It was the idea that they had introduced a new Flash, a new Green Lantern. That would be Barry Allen and also Hal Jordan. But the problem was that in the 40s, you had a Flash, you had a Green Lantern, Jay Garrick, Alan Scott. And so for fans in the 50s, they were kind of confused. And what DC said was, oh, if you see Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman fighting alongside with Barry Allen or Hal Jordan, just know that took place on Earth 1. And then if you see those three heroes fighting alongside with, Jay Garrick or Alan Scott, that took place in Earth 2. So all the different heroes you had in the 40s were on Earth 2, and then the new heroes coming in the 50s, well, that took place on Earth 1. Now, for the next good few decades there, you didn't have DC just publish all of these different books of Earth 2, Earth 1, crossovers. It kind of got a tad bit crazy. Chaos, confusion. And so you then had DC say, you know what, in 1986, let's do an official reboot. And of course, that gave us Crisis on Infinite Earth. Now, that event right there, once it was done, they gave us just one Earth, and that was it. But the question was then like, okay, what do you do with the JSA when it comes to now being, post-crisis? So what you had DC basically do was kind of start off small with the idea of giving each character who were part of the JSA a chance to be brought back into this brand new reality post-crisis, but in small samples in a series called Secret Origins. Now, Secret Origins was technically used as a way to explain the origins of different characters in DC Comics. And so when it came to Roy Thomas, what he did was he would use that series, each book, to kind of sit down and explain the secret origin to a particular character who is part of the JSA. Like, for example, when it came to Secret Origins number 7. Now, when it came to Secret Origins number 7, it was technically like a double feature, meaning that by that point in the Secret Origin series, you had DC kind of use each issue to explore the origins of two characters. So one was for Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, and the other one being used for the Sandman. And so it was Roy Thomas saying, let me use these Secret Origin books to slowly bring in the JSA, but to also re-explain their origin stories post-crisis. And so for issue number 7, we do explore the idea of the origin of, Sandman post-crisis. And so that is why when we jump into 1939, the opening pages of the storyline, we do pick up with, the mayor. Now, this is the mayor right now getting excited about the idea of the opening of the World Fair of New York, or New York World's Fair. Sorry, said it the wrong way there, but it's the New York World Fair. And so for the mayor, he's really excited about the opening of it. The problem is that out of nowhere, you had this character appear better better known as the Phantom of the Fair. Now, he doesn't really do much here in the opening pages of the storyline. He does cause a small commotion, but after doing that, he dips out. Matter of fact, before he does leave, he does say, like, hey, this fair is now officially haunted. Now, for the different people who are working for the mayor, they're kind of like, hey, boss, maybe just maybe we should go out of our way and like close down the fair for the time being because he just said this fair is haunted. Now, for the mayor, there's no way he's going to do that. But at the same time, it's him saying, like, listen, we can use this right now for free publicity. Once you had the story be spread across the nation, across the world, it's going to bring in more and more people to our fair. So why not let the story spread across the world to bring more and more people in? But this kind of leads us over to Wesley Dodds and also Lee Travis. Now, Lee Travis, he's better known as the Crimson Avenger. And matter of fact, he's one of the early creations of DC Comics. Matter of fact, it's right after Superman. I want to say he's between the creation of Superman and also Batman. I want to say it's maybe like 2 or 3 months after Superman that they had created the Crimson Avenger. And so in this storyline, we're kind of given the idea that the Crimson Avenger has been working out in the public as a vigilante, and more people are beginning to hear about him. Now, of course, no one truly knows that Lee Travis is the Crimson Avenger. Now, when it comes to Wesley Dodds, he becomes Sandman in this storyline. Now, for Roy Thomas, we kind of get the idea that he wasn't really given that much time, that much space to kind of flesh out the actual origin of Sandman like other writers do down the road post-crisis. But we do learn here that for the Crimson Avenger and Sandman, they're kind of close friends. Really, they grew up together. But we're also seeing like right now Wesley Dodds being very upset with the Crimson Avenger. And the reason why, because it's how he's currently using his newspaper. You see, for the Crimson Avenger, he's not trying to use his newspaper to inform the American public about what's happening right now over in Europe, because this does take place prior to World War II. Like different small events are kicking off right now, leading into the war over in Europe. And so it's Wesley saying you should be using your newspaper to inform the public about what's happening over in Europe and not try to just focus on like this Crimson Avenger character, but also the Phantom of the Fair. Now, it's also Wesley Dodds kind of believing in the possibility that when it comes to King George VI coming from Europe over to America and going over to the fair, that most likely the Phantom of the Fair might strike and try to kill off King George. Now, he also kind of believes there's a possibility that the Crimson Avenger might show up as well. Now, when you do have the two guys go their separate ways, it's really more of Wesley Dodds saying, like, I should get involved because there is a possibility that, you know, the Phantom of the Fair might go after King George. And it's also Wesley Dodds kind of believing in the possibility that the Crimson Avenger might also go after King George as well, because he has no idea the Crimson Avenger is his old childhood friend. But either way, we do see Wesley Dodds go out of his way to create his first ever Sandman costume. So the following day, we do see King George and also Queen Elizabeth arrive to, well, good old New York, and they head over to the fair. Now, this is a major event, and the reason why I'm saying that because this event is being televised to the TVs. Well, there's few TVs around that time in America, but also it's on the radio as well. Now, you do have Queen Elizabeth and also King George VI go out of their way to see the amazing robot that will be shown off at the fair, better known as Electro. Now, with this event being televised and also being played on the radio at the moment, it also is DC kind of showing us like which characters who are popping up in the 1940s overheard this big event with King George and Queen Elizabeth arriving into, well, New York. And I'm not going to really sit down and try to name these different characters, but getting back over to King George and his queen, Queen Elizabeth, While being at the fair, you then have the Phantom of the Fair being able to take over the body of the robot, Electro, and then use the robot as a way to try to kill off the Queen and the King. Now, luckily for the Royals, you did have a Sandman arrive and being able to just defeat the robot in one single kick. I found it pretty hilarious. But after doing that, you then have one of the guards of the mayor wanting to shoot Sandman, but the mayor realized Sandman is completely innocent here. Now, you also had the Sandman begin to go after who he believes could be responsible for the idea of Electro trying to kill off the Royals. And he believes it's the Crimson Avenger because you do have Lee Travis appear, but as the Crimson Avenger. Now, you do have the two characters begin to fight against one another and not knowing that technically they're on the same side. Not until you have Wesley Dodds being able to knock out Lee Travis. Now, when he does that, he then learns that his best friend, Lee here, is actually the Crimson Avenger, but also they're on the same side. Now, when you do have the two agree to work together, that is when you have the Phantom of the Fair appear. And really, the rest of the storyline is really more of the Crimson Avenger and also, well, Sandman working together to fight against, well, the Phantom of the Fair. And this battle is very short lived, like so short lived that once you do have the two characters being able to overpower the Phantom of the Fair and to make him leave, you then have our two heroes also go their separate ways. Now, before they do go their separate ways, you have the Crimson Avenger hand over his gas gun because he realized the gas gun does go perfectly with the outfit that Wesley Dodds had created to become the Sandman. And really, the book does end on that note right there. I do know, like, it's not a lot here for you guys to take in and enjoy, but at the same time, I still want to sit down and cover this because this was officially the starting point of where you had DC slowly begin the process of trying to bring these characters into the world post-crisis. With that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.